Hi, so in this episode I'll be talking to my friend Nick Robertson-Brown. He's the guy that really helped me develop my love and understanding for underwater photography. Over at BREW we'll be discussing Nick's life as a photojournalist after an accident when he was serving in the RAF changed the course of his life. Fancy a brew? Nick and his wife Caroline have developed a successful business called Frogfish Photography. They travel the world photographing and documenting marine life and dive sites for a variety of different media. Based in South Manchester, they also deliver inspirational talks and training to both adults and children about their love for conservation, nature and photography. So grab yourself a brew, sit back and enjoy. I just wish I had a better camera on my laptop because it's terrible this.
Listen, it's probably a good thing. This is a face that scares little children.
As they say, a face for radio.
It's a radio face, yes. We can safely say that. Obviously, in my youth, I was much prettier.
So, have you got a brew?
It's coffee.
What? Oh, coffee. I guess you brew coffee to some end, didn't you?
Yeah, because I got a little silver cafetiere. I put my ground beans in, pour water on top. It's very much like making tea.
Nice one. If you want to just introduce yourself a little bit, let people who are watching or listening to this get a little feel for who you are, a little flavour for what you've been up to and where you're going, and then we'll just see how it flows.
Okay. Well, I started my life, I joined the RAF as an aircraft technician.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, they took my brains out and made me an officer. So I was an engineering officer for the last few years. But I'd had an accident whilst I was in the RAF, and it got the point where they thought, do we want to pay him or do we want to just kick him out? So they kicked me out. And so I decided that I came back to Manchester, which is like my family home, even though I'd never lived here. Yeah. And went to Manchester Uni, did an environmental biology degree, because I've always really been interested in animals. I used to like aeroplanes, but animals has always been a passion of mine. So that led me to doing that. And from there, I did my PGCE, and whilst I was through there, I did more and more sort of teaching and education studies. So got a diploma in that. Then after 6 or 7 years of teaching, the injury that had kicked me out, that got me out of the RAF in the first place, was really causing horrendous problems. And I had to pack in working. So I had an operation. The first operation I had, it worked reasonably well, took it sort of back to where I was in the first place, but manageable. And so at this point, we decided life's too short. Because when you're having an operation and they're fiddling about in nerves in and around your neck, it's they tell you you've got whatever it is, a 20% chance or a 10% chance that you actually might come out of this paralyzed for life, and you think, yeah, okay, let's go and make most of life. And that's when we, and I say we, obviously I'm talking about Caroline, who is the other half of, and the driving force, let's be honest, behind Frogfish Photography. And we went to work in the Caribbean, tiny island called St. Eustatius. Wow. We worked out there for 2 years. Although, and the last 3 or 4 months we worked as park rangers, marine park rangers, which was great fun. And we just sort of felt we'd given the island something back, because it's a tiny island. Population at the time was about 1,400, something ridiculous like that. And a lot of those were Americans, only there half the year. Yeah. But great place, great diving, virtually unspoiled because there were so few people. And then we came back to UK, we opened Orca Divers in Chorlton, and it was going really well, and then the recession hit. And so it sort of started it was eating money, shall we say. But I'd set up Frogfish Photography, and it was doing really well, and we thought, you know what? So we closed the whole thing down and just carried on with Frogfish Photography. And here we are now, Frogfish Photography. I guess I'll be able to tell you more about it as we move on. Take it from there.
Right, so you've kind of covered quite a bit, which helps, because then it helps me lead into certain ideas me and Alex have got. It's very similar to where you and Caroline, and I didn't know that through my research, that you fired off to the Caribbean on a complete sort of change tack, isn't it? You've gone from just following the normal mundane life that everyone goes, and I'm going completely left field here.
Yes.
How much of a hard decision was that for you to just go, I'm going to stop my life now and go and do that?
Do you mean how much of an easy decision was that? To be honest, yeah, Andy, it was. But I was virtually paralyzed on the left-hand side, upper body, when this thing started to take hold. And there is more to life. And we were seriously into diving. I had changed jobs to teach at a school for kids who were emotionally behaviorally disturbed. So that was challenging. I enjoyed it immensely in many ways, working with kids that, had basically were given no moral compass is mostly who they were. And it just became the thing was, at that time, we had bought a brand new TVR Tuscan a few years before, and people didn't take it seriously when we said, no, we are going to leave. But when we sold the car, they knew. Yeah. And that was it. And yeah, you couldn't really drive a fast car around this tiny island. You'd break it as much as anything. But it wasn't that difficult. But I do have, because I was thrown out the RAF and I had done my 22 years, I had a pension. And my pension was paid to me at 22 because it was a disability pension.
Right.
And so that made it a little bit easy. We had enough money to sort of cover it, and there was a very small mortgage on the house, and we rented it out. Right. So in the short term, it was great. And the only reason, or the main reason we came back was family going, well, we never get to see you. We came back and we never got to see them. But
that's our predicament we're in now. We both earn a reasonable wage. We can have the life we want. 50% of the year, we can go where we want, when we want, but the stop is work and his income and family. Whereas I see other people, and very much Steve, I interviewed on the first one of this, he'd done his 35 years in the army, retired to Fuerteventura, lives the dream, but he still works now. 6 weeks in Iraq, and now he's in Mozambique, and then 6 weeks back in Fuerteventura. So there is finding that life balance, isn't there, where you've got the money and the finances to support the
very much so. Yeah, and Caroline is she's an energy consultant, environmental energy consultant. So she does some work, and it's a fairly niche job. So she can charge a reasonable amount for it, to go to places and sort of help them with their carbon footprint. It's tailing off a bit now because most of the big companies now have actually worked it out and have implemented all her savings, and it's amazing. I mean, just in going to visit one place, she could get savings of in the millions, really, in terms of energy usage. So it just shows where we were, and we didn't care about our environment, to now where most of us are thinking about it.
I've seen that with recently a post where she was trialing the new Mini, the electric one, wasn't she?
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot more of that on the ground now, isn't there? People being more aware of hybrid technology and sort of.
Yeah, and of course there are issues with it. The batteries that are, for mined for the cobalt, there's issues there.
Yeah.
But that's not an issue of let's go electric. That's an issue of let's look after the people properly and have people paid proper salaries to dig the stuff up.
Yeah. So how do you balance having what some people would view the perfect job? It seems to me that, with Scubaverse and with Dive Travel Adventures, you seem to be off traveling the world, living the dream, writing and photographing. To some people, certainly me, that looks like the most perfect job.
You've no idea how tough it is. We know, we fully appreciate just how lucky and privileged we are to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And to go to all these different places. We get to photograph the underwater animals. We also do some above land stuff, and then we write about it. And it is a really good job. We don't get paid much. That's the thing, as anyone who sort of writes in the dive press, well, at any press nowadays, there's not that much in it. Wow. We have, Caroline works part-time at her job. I have my pension, and now at the ripe old age of, I also collect an old age pension. So that gives us enough money as a backup to be able to do what we are doing.
Yeah.
It is very hard for people of your age to sort of get out there and make money at it. And as a photographer, with Alex Mustard's talk last night, he works hard at it and he makes enough money at it, but he has to lead trips. And it's something that I would rather not do, because when we go places, we're more or less left to our own devices underwater. We can photograph what we want. And we're not being, we're not having to direct other people and help out other people. It is quite selfishly, it is just about us and what we want. And when we go away on these trips, first thing we always do is we always try and go in. If we've got a good diving day, we'll try and get the stock shots that we know that tourist boards particularly want. And they're the ones you'll see when you go to the dive shows and travel markets. These places that are trying to sell the diving, there are pictures that, the size of the walls in your room that I've taken of Caroline's smiling face there with a camera in her hand. That is very rewarding, I have to say. So it's a fabulous job. The writing it comes naturally. I think some people are natural writers, and Caroline and I work really well together in that, she probably does the bulk of the writing, but I'll sort of go through it and flower it up and put all sorts of pretty words in it because she's effectively a really good science writer, whereas sometimes you need a bit more in it, I think.
How would you, if someone was trying to break into that market, they wanted to be a photographer, they wanted to perhaps get some articles published, for instance, in BSAC's Scuba magazine, they're always asking for contributions. How would you suggest someone might go about doing that?
It depends where you're starting from, Andy. I know exactly what you're saying. And if you're starting from absolute scratch, then that's a long way to go. And obviously you need to get yourself into diving. And I don't think you should pick a camera up until you've done, people are different. And some people are natural divers, but certainly nothing less than 50 dives. If people come to me saying they want to learn underwater photography, if they haven't done 50 dives, I will say, listen, go away, do some more diving and come back. And then, if we get a chance to get them in the pool, you can see how they are. So that's the first thing, is you've got to be a good diver. You cannot take a camera underwater. It doesn't have the dangers that technical diving has and rebreathers have, but there are, you can lose concentration in your diving, you can lose yourself in the photography. And so that's the first thing, is to be competent and comfortable underwater as a diver, then add the camera and build your camera slowly. And I think I have found that most of the people that I've worked with start off with a relatively simple system, then add a light, then maybe add another light, and then you're kind of going, get the system you want. It takes time. It takes time to build up. But say, for example, someone like you, who is already a great diver, then you've got that first bit cracked, and you think, what do I want to do with my diving now? And this is where it does branch. You get to a certain point where some people want to go the technical route. Some people want to focus on cave diving, or you might want to go down the photography route. And whilst photography doesn't have the inherent dangers, it's probably too strong a word, but you will get, if you're diving on rebreathers and you have somebody like me who's got a scatterbrain, at some point I would forget to do something and I wouldn't come back. So I think for a lot of technical people, you have to be of that kind, and I'm not. I am probably a little bit more creative, and that's why the photography appeals to me, and I love it. And the first time when I did my first open water dive was on Grand Turk after I'd qualified. And we were sat off the wall, which goes straight down 7,000 feet, whatever that is in meters. And at that point, this Caribbean reefie just came straight up, looked at me, and then swam off. And I thought, I've got to get a camera down here. And that sowed the seeds. And it's then a case of building. And in order to get your photography out there, is start entering competitions. But we originally, Flickr's not so big now, but it still works. Put your stuff on there and get comments back. But by entering competitions, and that's where the NUPG is so good for newcomers, and indeed you know, Bristol and BSoup and all the other underwater photography societies. They are really good for people starting, because you can look at what other people have done and you go, I can do that picture, I can do that picture. And as you've come up and chatted to me after a meeting. There's I can think of people throughout there, and Paul Ansell springs to mind, if I'm allowed to mention names. Paul came and joined us 2 or 3 years ago, and you could see he always listened. If he didn't understand something, he'd come up and he'd ask me about it afterwards. And in a very short space of time, Paul Ansell has gone from being, you know, a snapper to a seriously good photographer.
What helped you make that break from just being someone who enjoyed diving, saw this Caribbean reefy, bought himself a camera, to your progression to where you are now, where you're running classes, you've developed your own underwater photography course, and you're very much the go-to at the club? What was your progression?
Well, once your photos are out there and you enter competitions, particularly dive related, so the dive show, for example, BSoup used to run a competition, and quite early on I won one of the categories with a shot from the sardine run, which it's a cracking image, and you know, it was well known. And it was at that point where I spoke to Sport Diver and said, you know, would you like me to, can I write for you? And he said, well, I haven't seen what you write like. And a lot of it is different. And if anybody, the first point I would say is, if anybody wants to get into it for a specific magazine, read their magazines and see what style of writing is in there. Because if you're not a writer, but you're comfortable with writing, you will have your own style. And it's only when you start reading different people's articles in these magazines that you realize that everybody is different. So if you might have to get your style to fit the magazine you're writing with. But with Sport Diver, that was that got us well known, and we were able to negotiate with tourist boards and the likes to go to these places and find the stories to write. When Sport Diver folded, we started working. I spoke to Steve Weinman, who's the editor. We did some work with them. But Scubaverse, Dave Alexander at Scubaverse, you know, had wanted to sort of move his thing forward and asked if I would be his photo editor and run a photo competition, which we do. Caroline is the deputy editor, so it's a bit of a family affair, really, I suppose. But it works, and it has certainly helped. And one of the things that sort of is an indicator that you're there. We got an email several years ago now from Cavendish Press saying, would you like to write a guide to underwater photography for us? And Caroline said, this is a scam. And I looked and thought, yeah, it could be. But it turns out it wasn't. And so the first book, and I think you've got this one, is Underwater Photography, Art and Techniques. And it's a guide for beginners. I wrote it deliberately aiming at people who didn't have a clue about photography. So there's a whole couple of chapters, really, you've read it yourself, whole couple of chapters which sort of teach you about what is happening inside the camera. And then there are several other books that we co-wrote together, and on some of those we're able to bring in the science.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for me, I read it. I borrowed it, if you remember, off you over Christmas, and I read it over Christmas. It was a relatively easy read for someone who didn't really know the fundamentals of what I was reading about, and it gave me a great foundation for then when I came to your house just after Christmas and New Year to do some basic training just on your kitchen table with my camera, if you remember. And from that, I built on that foundation, and I feel much more comfortable, certainly with a better camera now, thanks to Caroline. You know, you need to get that one, so I got it. But certainly with that foundation, I could build on that and start to develop my own style. The only thing I'm short of now is inspiration for that style and opportunity.
Yeah.
Which is what I'd ask. Probably my next question would be, how do you, or what inspires you with your photography?
I like taking photos that tell a story, and I think, which is, I guess, why I'm drawn into photojournalism more than anything. And I'm always looking for a picture that you can look at and say, oh, yeah, you can see where it is. The macro stuff macro stuff is lovely for those that like it, but I don't really enjoy getting tucked in and taking pictures of tiny little things that you can make look great on the screen, and there's no criticism. People like that, that's what they want to do, but I just love telling the story. And the whole of last year, when we were still diving, then I didn't put my macro lens on once.
Right.
I only ever went in with my fisheye lens and don't put on the front, and just took pictures that tell stories. And you can show reefs. Obviously, a lot of the stuff we do like to focus on the big animal stuff, and therefore fisheye lenses are great. It means you have to get up close, which is even more fun.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. So just, I mean, for me, I'm just, like I said, it's opportunity, I suppose, first. I'm lacking of that just because we're on lockdown, or my next trip, which is in the middle of June, to go to Croatia, doesn't look likely. Even Mexico in December, that's probably not very likely. But nonetheless, you know, you've seen I made a little underwater reef in my own back garden. You know, that's enough to just get in and do something and fiddle with them settings and get amongst them. So,
well, do you know, you're absolutely right, Andy. That is something that I always would say to people is, once particularly if you've got a new camera, then you need to get to be able to use that camera without having to think about it. Because you're diving, you're thinking of other things, you're looking around, you've got a buddy, you have responsibilities. Even as a pussycat recreational diver like I am, you still have lots of things to think about, and so that makes sense.
It was good fun. It was flipping cold, I can tell you now. But to get all my gloves on and understand the functionality of that camera with them gloves on, you know, what I could do and couldn't, and how I could make some of them settings easier, I think it'll pay dividends. So certainly the next time I'm in warmer waters, bare-handed, I'll fly through whatever I need to, and it'll be hopefully not second nature. I hope it is second nature, but I don't think it will be yet.
Well, there will come a point where it kind of is, because once you sort of work out what your style is, and you won't do that consciously, you know, subconsciously you will develop a style, is perhaps a better way of putting it. And as you develop that style, you will be only using half a dozen of the buttons on the camera.
Right.
So there are very few changes you have to make, unless you suddenly go, oh, I want to do a slow motion shot, you know, in which case, yes, then you've got to start playing with everything. But for normal use, for the photos you will take, there will be very few changes. I mean, literally, probably your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed are the three that you're going to play about with mostly. Then there's the power on your strobes. But for the most part, I generally set my camera to f11. And then the shutter speed, as high as I can get it when you are, if you've got a camera and you're trying to sync them, if you've got the strobes, most cameras do have a limit to how high the shutter speed can be. So in 1/250th is the maximum on many. Some it's less, some it's more. But they are really the only things. I tend to play with the ISO probably more than anything. ISO and the strobe power.
Right. Well, that's something I've yet to discover. Is, I mean, obviously mine have the adjustment, but mine's still on Billy Basic. Andy doesn't really know. Let's get used to the camera first. So that would set me on to the training that you can provide.
Well, we do. Well, as you know yourself, but yeah, the training from me as Frogfish. Then what we do, I like to do some work on the big table here, where we set up miniature reef scenes. We've got all the equipment, and actually just get used to how close you need to get to your subject. This is mostly macro stuff at this point anyway. And from there, once you've got the essentials and you're happy, and you know, you can take black background photos, and you can change the depth of field and see the difference, and you can produce the type of photo you want. And one of the things that I show, as I'm sure I did with you, is that, you know, you can take a picture with a very blurry background where you can't see anything other than the subject with a small depth of field. You can take a shot that will show everything, which is something you might want to do if you want to show the environment of the animal you're living with. Or for sort of the more fine art stuff, then the black background techniques, which are very simple, will create a really nice image. And they're the first three things that I would say you need to play with, get comfortable with. And once you've cracked that, it gets easier. It becomes second nature.
Right.
I hope. It has to be, really, because, you know, when it comes, my brain was never good before I got old. So it just has to be on autopilot now.
Yeah. So what came first for you? Was it your love for nature, the diving, or the photography?
Well, to be honest, I've always had a camera. Well, from, you know, for a long time, I've always had a camera. But I bought my first SLR, which was a Pentax ME Super, in 1980. Wow. So that's before a lot of people are born, I guess.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
So I've always enjoyed it. The tragedy, and that as a total aside, is all my photos, before we, you know, all the film photos and the rest, before we got digital, I kept in a box in our upstairs bedroom, and we lost a slate off a roof during a storm, and water destroyed every single photo I've got. I can't tell you how upsetting that is, that everything, you know, even me as a kid, all the way through, you know, to current time, which was sometime in the 90s, lost everything. So it'd be a good excuse for an alien, wouldn't it? You know, I lost all my photos in a flood.
Yeah. Wow. So what does diving give to you, short of a little bit of an income and something to do?
What I get from diving, and I have to say, particularly in warm water diving, I can come back to the green water stuff, but with this neck injury, which is, I am registered as somebody who suffers pain permanently, and the only place I don't feel pain is when I'm actually in the water, where my head is supported. And this is where, is it the fact that my head is supported and all the pressure is taken off, all the damage in my neck, or is it just my Zen place and I just forget about all that? I don't know, I can't tell you, but it's certainly, when I'm in the water, particularly warm water, I'm in a good place, and I just love diving. Cold water diving, and getting, once again, as my neck degenerates, I've had 2 operations now and I can't have any more. So it is slowly getting worse. So my days of UK diving are really coming to an end, getting into a dry suit and all the hassle, which is great hassle when you're fit and young and healthy, but it's a lot of work for an old git like me.
I suppose if you've got that neck injury, having to push almost like a rebirth, isn't it? Getting yourself through that.
It's a boy, yes, yeah.
Whereas if you can just put a zip up behind the back of your neck, that's a doddle, isn't it?
It does make a difference, Andy, yeah. And it's why things like, you know, the disability people that do the diving for the disabled and the limbless in particular is, I mean, it's great because it's something you can do. And when we go, wherever we go places, I tell them, look, I've got an issue with my neck, and I've not had, well, there was one, but we'll not mention that. Everybody just says, that's not an issue. I kit up on the back of the boat and just roll in, or if that's not possible, throw my kit in the water and I'll kit up in the water and then drop down. So it is one of those hobbies, sports, pastimes, whatever you want to call it, where it doesn't really matter how disabled you are physically, you can do it.
Having that peace of mind that you can do the skills that you need to, and being in that happy place, isn't it? So as long as you can look after yourself or your body, whatever, if you're in that happy place, it's somewhere much nicer than being at home, innit? In this cold, horrible weather we're in now again. Yeah,
you know, it is. Well, I think that once this rain and cold bit passes, I think it will probably be all right after that. But it's just getting back into the diving, and from our point of view, the photojournalism stuff, we have got projects we're working on at the minute. I think it's going to be next year before we actually, you know, get to go on another assignment.
How do you think this recent turn of events is going to affect not only the diving industry, but certainly doing assignments, like you said?
Yeah, it is. it's going to be really hard. I mean, I think that within weeks, maybe months, but I think weeks people will be allowed to go diving again. And I really don't think that'll be too far, because it is something you can do. Well, let's face it, you're virtually in full hazmat, aren't you, when you're diving, particularly in the UK, in your dry suit. So that shouldn't be an issue. The only problem you've got there is, if you do get into trouble, is that people having to rescue you are taking on that added danger to themselves that you may be infected. But I think in a few weeks, we should be allowed to do a bit of diving. But I think, I mean, these things are so delicate that if we push it too soon, too quickly, then it could knock you back. If we end up try it for a week and it doesn't work, that's going to set us back 3 or 4 weeks, I would think. So I'm inclined, but I'm in a better position. I mean, I do have a pension coming in, so I don't have to worry too much about extra money coming in. And I know that an awful lot of people in this country really are struggling badly to make ends meet.
I think there's those that have been quite fortunate, and certainly someone like myself who's been self-employed for 10 years, so I've got the kind of accounts that I can show to whoever need, HMRC, so I can get some return. There's people that either haven't kept a set of accounts or haven't been trading very long, and they're going to be right up the creek without a paddle, aren't they?
I know. And there's one thing on there, of course, is Caroline, with Caroline's stuff, is when she puts hers in, she's so honest that she puts everything down there. If she gets this 80%, then she will do all right. If I was one of those people that tried to no, so just to keep the tax smaller, it's payback time, isn't it? Karma is going to come against you if you've been creative with your taxing.
They've had it good enough for long enough, haven't they? 4 holidays a year, just doing the odd window cleaning round every now and again. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Have you got your dive computer? Did you dig it out?
I've got this one on me.
What's your surface interval now then?
Oh, it's forever. Last dive was February in Egypt. Yeah, we were in Egypt, where we did a week. It was really quiet, and I'm sure it is again now. But the reefs were looking great. The only downside to diving in February in Egypt is when you get off the boat, it is so cold.
Really? That was the opening of Sharm, wasn't it? You've gone out to look at Sharm opening back up.
That's right. Yeah.
Is it better? Is it much different? Has it changed?
Well, the one thing I would say, because we went to Sharm about 18 months ago, and it was was still very quiet, and there hasn't been much since. It is quiet, but the reefs are pristine. All the soft corals are just everywhere, and the hard corals seem to have gone, we got a gap here, better work a bit harder, and they've grown faster than they normally would. So the diving itself out there is absolutely fabulous, and I suspect that when this does end and people start going back, it's going to be even better, because that is, for me, Egypt is all about the colours and the reefs.
It's crazy the impact that we would have had that's now allowed that to sort of come back somewhat from the gap of not being able to go out there.
It is, yeah, it is crazy. It just shows the impact that we, as a species, are having on the planet. And I mean, as we are conservation led in a lot of the stuff we do. And amongst the things we do with the UK ambassadors for Sharks for Kids, which was a sort of organisation, charity, whatever, set up in the Bahamas, which we have a great relationship with anyway. And we go around schools mostly, but Cubs, Scouts and guides, all the places where there are kids, and we basically talk to them a little bit. We show them our images. Now, it doesn't matter sort of who we're showing them to. You start showing images of lovely sharks and other animals all close up. It doesn't take much to catch the kids' imagination. So we use that, and then we manage to sort of turn them into believing that the truth about sharks, that they're not bad man-eating animals, but they're just personalities that live in the sea, and that's their space. And when you're in there with them, you have to respect their space. And you talk about the fact that the fatalities globally every year are you're looking at 5, 6 or 7, and you turn that round to how many sharks are killed by us, and you're in the millions, the hundreds of millions. And the kids begin to warm to the sharks, and then we start to mention a little bit, about the plastics, which is the other thing we do, which is sea straw. I don't know if you've heard of sea straw, but we set it up to sort of cover most of South Manchester, because that's where we live. And we made a big effort at ensuring that all our local pubs and restaurants were not using plastic straws. We're using alternatives, and that was really quite successful. And then, of course, in Manchester, Andy Burnham sort of has said, well, you're going to have to get rid of them, all of your plastic straws, because we're going to be plastic free. And it became so much easier, and especially with the help of David Attenborough telling everyone. I mean, with that series was brilliant. It absorbed everybody. It doesn't matter what strata of life you are from. They were absorbed by it. And whenever we were out there as sea straw, people would say, oh, isn't David Attenborough wonderful? And yes, he is. What are we going to do when he's gone?
I don't know if you saw it. He came out on stage, I think it was at Glastonbury last year, and his reception there, because certainly for me, I was brought up, do you remember Wildlife on One? Back in the day? I used to look forward to coming home from Cubs to watch that at 7:30, 8 o'clock, whenever it was on. But everybody for the last 60 years must have been brought up with him being on the telly. So to see him come out in such a public arena and have a rapturous round of applause in a few years when he's gone, who's really going to take over him and captivate people the way he has? I don't know.
There are one or two candidates, but I mean, not with his background. I mean, he was the...
With regard to sharks, I'd like to be able to do more with how you talk, the sharks for kids. Because there's no way you could go into the plains of Africa and mooch around a couple of lions, could you? And just keep your distance without them going, I'm having you. Whereas you can go in the sea with a bit of knowledge and be respectful, and quite often just get left completely alone to do what you're doing, because they're not that bothered, are they?
No, and I think, and you forgot the time, the first shark dive we ever did, where the sharks were fed, which means they come in, we did in South Africa with a guy called Mark Addison, who's done an awful lot for sharks in South Africa, where they have been persecuted for some time. Yeah. And we were on the rib and put the bait over the side to bring the sharks in. And over the course of about half an hour, there were 2 or 3 sharks would turn up with the fins around the boat, and then there were another few more, and then it got to 10 or 12. I said, can we get in now? And he said, no, just wait. And then there'd be 15, 20. Can we get in now? No, just wait. And they were pushing 30 fins.
Wow.
Swimming around this rigid inflatable boat, rubber boat. And it was like a scene from a cartoon, shark-infested waters. And when you've got to roll in backwards off the boat with all your kit, and you're going in there, and he says, right, you can go now. And I went, gulp.
So I have to.
And you roll in and you drop under the water, and you realise, despite the fact you've got all these sharks that are here looking for food, they're not interested in us. No. They're just not interested in us. And we were just allowed to get on, take the photos, and just enjoy being in with them. And even when I'd run out of air and I'd filled my memory card or whatever, I would still just sit there and wait till everyone else, it's time to come out, because it was just a pleasure to be in the water with these. I just think they're beautiful and lovely creatures.
So where's the most favourite place that you've ever dived?
It does change from day to day, doesn't it, really? But for me, it is the Bahamas. Both of us love the Bahamas, just because for the diving, it's the big stuff. It's sharks. So you go to one of the islands and there'll be one species of shark. You have tiger sharks, bull sharks, oceanic white tips, all the different sharks, but they aggregate on different islands. Right. And so, you can go and spend a week on one island photographing oceanic white tips, and on another occasion you can spend a week with the bull sharks and maybe the hammerheads. And the hammerheads are fabulous, and I think of all the diving experiences, it's probably the hammerhead feeding dives that are the ones that really move us. Together we've co-authored 3 books. the first one of those was yet another of those emails that said, would you like to write a book about your experiences underwater and the rest? And we thought, yeah, okay. And when I did ask, why did you choose us? And I think it is because, and it is relevant to what you're saying, in that as photojournalists and people who do what we do and we're conservation minded, it sort of drew the attention of publishers. And so the publisher that we work with now is Reed New Holland. They're an Australian company, but they've got a guy in the UK who's the editor, and he's a birdie person, so he's very much into wildlife himself and stuff. But the first book we did was this one. I don't know if you can read that. It's back to front. World's Best Wildlife Dive Sites. And in there are a collection of the best dive sites that we've been to that we like. There are inevitably some that we've missed because we don't go everywhere. But these are the ones that we've seen that we really enjoyed. After that, we were asked to write a book. And this, as a biologist, was the one that really made it for us. And it's called Deadly Oceans. Wow. And you can buy this in the Natural History Museum. So you can imagine that as a biologist, my book's for sale in the Natural History Museum. Okay, I can call it a day. Can you put that on my headstone, please? This is all about the interaction in the water between predators and prey, and how the prey defend themselves, and how the predators get round that, and all the different. You'd be amazed at the different strategies that animals use. I mean, nudibranchs just chew on hydroids, push all the toxins into their body so they taste nasty, and then paint themselves nice bright colours as a warning. And that's just one simple form. But all the different, like the different shark species, there are so many different ways that sharks give birth, for example. Some give live birth, some give part live birth. I won't try and explain it. And some lay eggs. Right. So under the water, the stuff that's going on and the biology, even amongst, similar species, is amazing. And then the last one that we did, which is the most recent one, is this one here. They said, we want to write a book and we wanted to be called Extreme Wild Dives. And we went, we don't really do extreme. That's for the likes of Andy, and we do fluffy stuff. So we said, if you call it wild dives, then we had to interpret what a wild dive meant. And for us, the wild dive itself is something, it can be wild. We did one there where we rode on the back of a submarine down to the bottom of the sea, taking pictures. That was pretty wild in a wild sense of the word. Whereas there are other things in there where you've got even small stuff. They're so small, it's wild. You take Shaun the Sheep nudibranch, for example. I mean, that is wild, and it's
really? There's something called the Shaun the Sheep nudibranch?
Yeah.
Wow, I need to find that now.
I'll send you a picture. In fact, when we got a picture of it in the Philippines, you take it head on and it looks like a sheep. Wow. And we wrote to Nick Park, emailed him and said, do you mind if we use one of your pictures to sort of show the difference? Because I don't know if you knew there was a nudibranch called Shaun the Sheep. He said, yes, I do actually. I had heard that. Said, but here's a picture for you to use so that people can compare them. So spread it where you want, he said. So what is a wild dive? Is it riding a submarine to the bottom of the sea? Is it face to face with, tiger sharks, which are so cool? People imagine shark dives to be frenetic, but they're not. They're calming. They're just so relaxing. I can understand if you've not done it before, your adrenaline might be pumping a bit, but once you've done it a few times, you just begin to realize these guys are just cool, and they take they actually take your own heart rate down. It's fabulous. So we know we're privileged and very lucky to do what we do. And I know that as it gets harder and harder for me, as I get a little bit more ancient, Caroline is certainly her photography. Caroline had never picked up a camera before she met me.
Really?
And she's never used film. And I gave her my D200 in Subal housing when I moved on to a D700. And she she just took to it. She'll tell you how difficult it was, but she's a natural, and whereby I consider myself to be technically pretty good. When it comes to choosing the angle and how to take that shot, Caroline's way ahead. She's just got a natural eye for photography. I just copy people.
You probably see, as you were talking through your different books then, the size of my smile getting bigger and bigger. A, because I'm excited to get diving in, take my camera in, but B, just what you're talking about and your enthusiasm behind it, it's quite infectious. I find it can be quite viral for me just to talk to someone who's enthusiastic about something. I'm like, I need to do that now. I need to go buy everything to do with what he just said. So probably all 4 of your books will be on order in a minute. Do you feel that you're an inspiration to anyone? Do people give you that impression?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I do. Because we know how privileged we are to do this, and to be able to do it and to be able to capture it on, and we're doing more and more video as well now, but to be able to capture it on film, on still, whichever, and you show it to people. And we do, but I sometimes do I'm talking about talks. We do talks, and if we're doing them together, it's normally a photo club or a dive club that wants some guidance on it. And as soon as you put those images up, you've got people, anyone that's interested in wildlife, and I think that's far more people than are openly involved in it. Yeah. But David Attenborough showed us how much we as a species love nature. And so I start showing pictures of nature, of wonderful sharks or tiny nudibranchs or tiny frogfish. It's easy to hold their attention. And obviously when we work as a pair, we do play the old, married couple. No, it's not like that. Don't be silly. And the other one takes over and tells the story. And so we entertain as well. We try.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, have you got any mentions or hellos or thank yous you want to put out while we're wrapping this up then?
Well, that's a difficult one. I hadn't thought about that. I would say that the first person, photography-wise, at Visions in the Sea, which was at the time run by Steve Warren, and then we did one. When I say we, Caroline did all the work. We did a Visions in the Sea at Manchester, which went down really well. But at the first one that I went to in London, I chatted to Charlie Hood, who doesn't do so much now. He used to write for Scuba, and or wasn't Scuba, whatever it was called before it was Scuba, but he used to write for the Bizak magazine. Yeah. But he was well known at the time as a wreck photographer. I think he's eased off a bit now. But he looked through my images. It was my first go with an SLR underwater, and just gave me a few little tips. Yeah, I think I owe a thank you to him for that, because I think that moved me a little bit faster to get to the next step than it would have done if I hadn't spoken with him. Right. But there are so many great photographers out there, and I mean, Alex Mustard he's just brilliant, isn't he? He's a great photographer, and what I particularly like about Alex and his attitude is he'll tell you how he took the photo. So many photographers, you say, well, how did you take that? And they'll don't really want to let you know.
Well, that was a point that Steve mentioned on one of the first videos, because he used to be an instructor in the army at the gunnery school down at Bovington, and he said he had this phrase that knowledge isn't yours to keep hold of, it's something to pass on.
It's a very good point.
And I think exactly what you said there about Alex, if he'll just tell you, yeah, I did this and I set this up and I went there and I had these settings, you can then turn that into your own way, can't you? That'll set you on the right path. Whereas if someone holds back, you're just kind of stuck in limbo, and then maybe not carry on or get any better, which I think is a massive disservice to the sport and the sort of hobbies and life that we all are talking about now.
I guess I should thank Mares as well, because we are the UK ambassadors for Mares, so we are their brand ambassadors.
Yeah.
But it's been one of those things, because we're not well off. We certainly have enough money, but it does mean we don't have to worry about our equipment, because when they get a new concept come out, we will get that. So we're never short of dive gear, and if we need something specifically, they'll get it to us. Yeah. And if we'd had to buy that, it would make it tight. It really would.
It's a big expense, isn't it?
It is, and actually they're a lovely bunch.
Mm. I don't know if you saw, I did a video at the dive show in February, March time, when it was like Go Diving 2020. And I was asking people how they plan a dive expedition. And one of them was Monty Halls. I had a really good chat with him for about half an hour before we interviewed him. And one of his things was about, if people wanted to plan an expedition, you should just crack on doing it. But go to suppliers, not asking them directly for sponsorship, but ask them, I'm going to a certain place. Have you got a contact that when I get there and I'm using your equipment, who can I ask to fix it, and that kind of thing? And that's how he sort of draws, or sometimes can bring on sponsorship, which is quite helpful when you, like you said, you're not making much from doing what you're doing. You can also be that brand ambassador. I think it's quite a good concept to get brands on board. I've certainly found doing this YouTube thing, a few people have said, now can you wear my Mojo wristband, for instance, and sell that? And I wish Etnies had sponsored me. I get free trainers then, but they haven't. So what's next for you and Caroline then?
We're working on a project at the minute. We're both doing writing of various things at the minute, which are, the next thing is when we go away. We should have been in Belize a few weeks ago. We should have been in Anguilla next week, and it's such a shame. Hopefully we'll get twice as many next year.
Well, that'll be all right, won't it?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time, mate. I really appreciate it, and hopefully, we get to see each other soon.
I'm sure we will, and try and make sure you get on. We've got Alex Tattersall on the next Zoom NUPG meeting, and I can promise you that's entertaining.
Mega, mate. Right, take care. I'll see you soon.
Cheers, Andy.
Cheers, buddy.
See you soon.
Thanks a lot.
So that brings us to the end of episode 4 with my friend Nick Robertson-Brown. Links to all the things that Nick discussed will be in the podcast notes, along with details of how you might get involved with the work that Nick and Caroline do. My guest on episode 5 is Vicky Burton, a friend I came across through Instagram and a big advocate for girls that scuba. Vicky only learned to dive 18 months ago, but has travelled the world with her compact camera and captivated 15,000 followers on Instagram. You've been listening to Fancy a Brew with me, Andy the Northern Diver. You can find more episodes of scuba related content on my YouTube channel. A link is in the description below. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's someone or something you'd like on the show, then let us know via the Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.